Hello and good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. I regret that I couldn't be there in person, but I am really, really honored to be among the incredible panelists and guests that you have this year. So I'll dive right in. I am Beth Allgood. I'm the founder and president of OneNature. And our mission at OneNature is to advance the interconnection of wildlife and human well-being so that animals, people, and nature can flourish together. We do that through partnering with international conservation organizations to bring a data-driven focus on human well-being and happiness to their wildlife conservation efforts. This leads to improved financial, programmatic, and community outcomes of the projects. And then we use the results of these community projects and the data, along with other collaborative research, to advocate for transformational change. So I imagine that through the course of the conference, a lot of people are talking about the need to shift away from a GDP only metric to one that is broader and more holistic and inclusive, especially on a global level. And so I'm not going to dive into that too deeply. I'm going to focus on the need to look at the local level as well. This economic productivity approach is ingrained in conservation approaches for decades, and it's often at odds with the community's values where we work. We believe that without deeply understanding and supporting community well-being from the community's perspective and based on their values, projects will ultimately fail. They will fail to reverse the extinction crisis. They'll fail to secure environmental sustainability. They won't support social justice and human thriving in communities who are stewarding the world's remaining wildlife and wild places. And they really deserve global support in doing so. So just wanted to share a quick roadmap on where we're going in the next 5 minutes or so. We've already done introduction and the why. So we'll talk a little bit about how the definition of well-being, how you measure the value of nature and wildlife, and the well-being in conservation approach, and then end with some recommendations. So what is well-being? There has been research for many, many years about how to define well-being and what encompasses, what domains are included in well-being. And we like this definition, the combination of feeling good and functioning well. These are a selection of the domains that are generally understood to be part of a holistic well-being approach: life satisfaction, psychological health, physical health, of course, isn't there, but it should be, community, culture, education, environment, government, economy. We can add spirituality. And these are kind of typically understood to be the domains of well-being. And then how do you measure the value of nature? There are different approaches. The instrumental value approach is a pretty traditional economic approach of measuring the importance and value of nature. And that is what directly benefits people, basically. What from nature is benefiting people, including food and energy and raw materials, that sort of thing. The intrinsic value is the inherent worth of nature, independent of people. So those two values are sometimes seen to be at odds with each other. And that's where the third way of valuing, the relational value, is really important, because that values the connection between people and nature and includes material and non-material values like culture and spirituality. And then with wildlife, OneNature is specifically interested in understanding how to holistically value wildlife. We think that's where many gaps are in research and in practice, actually. And it can be really challenging to isolate the value of wildlife from the value of nature as a whole, of course. It's not very easy to experiment on, unlike companion animals, where we know petting a dog can lower your blood pressure, that kind of thing. It's difficult, more difficult to extract that idea of wildlife being valuable in different ways than an ecosystem value. And in many times, the economic value of nature is of wildlife is more around the parts and products of wildlife than the kind of living, breathing, thriving wildlife. But the well-being of many human communities is directly dependent on local wildlife, and the survival of wildlife population depends on the stewardship of local communities. So, what are the elements of this well-being and conservation approach? I'll start with the measurement. So, typically in conservation projects, we do measure well-being of communities through objective measures that are often decided upon by the conservation organization or the funding organization as indicators that the community is doing well. These objective indicators is information that's observed about the community. Subjective indicators are not commonly used, and that is information about the subject's experience from the subject's perspective. And at OneNature, we believe that both of those are really critical to really establishing a well-being baseline where the community is now, and then monitoring it over time. This can provide reliable information about how the community is feeling and some early warning signs about unanticipated challenges, either from the project or even in the external environment, but that the project needs to know about to really address community needs. We've, OneNature and the Happiness Alliance developed a peer-reviewed, validated community well-being index, which we call Wild Happiness. It assesses life satisfaction, the many domains of well-being, and the community's feelings about wildlife and nature. Understanding non-economic values like culture and spiritual values is so important. We recently collaborated with partners on a research project where we looked at 10 case studies where existing spiritual and cultural connections between communities and wildlife was supported and strengthened while they were addressing pretty intense human-wildlife conflict and other community challenges. And that was wonderful. We had 10 case studies from communities all over the world, really. It's really good. Community ownership is the last piece, and this can be enhanced through deep listening of the community and their perspective, establishing this well-being baseline like we talked about, and then sharing the results with the community. It is their data and they should have it for decision making. Participatory planning and capacity building with these well-being values and priorities in mind, and then monitoring and evaluating the project using this well-being tool or other subjective and objective measures of well-being to really be included as a critical measure of success. If you're succeeding in the long run, the community understands and appreciates the project and owns it. Right, so final slide here is our recommendation. So we recommend that this approach be adopted and that the results can generate data for decision makers to better understand the value and connection communities have to wildlife and nature, in addition to supporting the individual communities where this approach is taken, of course. And ultimately, that we can all develop more socially just and sustainable policies and funding that increases human thriving, protects species and habitats, and improves long-term economic sustainability. So again, I'm so grateful to be invited to present and for being part of this forum. And my contact information is here, and I really invite collaboration and conversation at this really important time in our relationship with the earth. Thank you so much.